Hey friends, welcome back to Heretical Hippies, where Anna and Kari Jo wander back into the wreckage of their deconstruction to see if they can offer hope to anyone else who might be climbing out of the dust and ashes of their faith. Buckle up, it's about to get real. In this episode, we're talking about how to love during deconstruction. And Anna and I, we both made lists of how to do that, how to love ourselves, and also how to love others. If you aren't currently in a deconstruction process, or maybe you are, just to give tips on how to love those who are deconstructing their faith. So Anna, welcome. Happy to have you here and to discuss this together today.
Hi, Kari Jo.
So first, how to love yourself. Number one, don't freak out. So expand that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely that was the first thing that I thought of when we were making these lists was don't freak out. I feel like there's so much pressure within evangelical Christianity to share, right? And
Yes.
although vulnerability is wonderful and beautiful and needed, you're not obligated ever to share with anyone. And so I think that's where the freak out in me came up. I started worrying like, oh crap, now that I'm at this new place, I feel obligated to share where I'm at, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what caused me to have this anxiety and fear, really, about what do I say? I mean, I remember this feeling so well, like when I first started really genuinely embracing the very real reality that I was walking away from my faith. I was so fearful everywhere I went that I was going to run into somebody that I knew, or that I was going to have a conversation and not know what to say, or feel obligated to say something and be honest, because I'm so freaking vulnerable all the time, you know?
Yeah, exactly. See, that's interesting because you have a different dynamic than I have had because I moved in the middle of my deconstruction. And so I didn't worry about that at all. So that's fascinating. I mean, I worried about other things, like I knew that people were going to be asking me, oh, have you found a church yet? And things like that. But yeah, the anxiety is very real, no matter what that looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, deconstruction. I think it's important that people understand while going through deconstruction that depression and anxiety are often companions along the way. To just acknowledge that, and that's normal, and yeah, to seek whatever help you need for those types
Sure.
of things that you're experiencing.
Deep breath.
Yes, always.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, number two, embrace the fact that change is inevitable and you will be at a different place in the future. And then we had similar ones on this one. I said, allow yourself to not know the answers, but remain curious and open as you discover different ways of thinking or believing. Yeah, I agree with your change. I mean, we will listen to these recordings in a year from now and realize, oh, geez, I'm not there anymore. Like, I don't
Right.
believe that anymore, or I don't practice that anymore. And honestly, that's part of what's so beautiful about the journey is you're allowed to explore. You are encouraged to seek out new understandings and maybe a way of engaging with the world, and to just try different approaches to life. You don't have to be boxed in to this very narrow, you have all the answers, evangelical approach to living. To being open to change, the impermanence of belief of everything. That's a really important part of loving yourself and not allowing shame and guilt to come in when you are trying and experimenting with things that have earlier in your faith journey been deemed as negative or even demonic. I mean, that's a different topic, but so much fear is baked into evangelical teachings, and that's definitely not how to live. We should not be living with fear. So
Right.
don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of pursuing things that you're curious about or that are new to you.
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I was like, if I don't believe this, then what do I believe? And I felt like this pressure in myself, this anxiety to like figure it out right away. And it doesn't matter it really doesn't matter, because in a week, like you said, or a month, or 2 years or 5 years or whatever, it's all going to change. And because the amount of information you have coming in, and what you've learned to understand, and your experiences, everything play a part in the choices that we make and how we choose to think and believe. So embracing change is foundational to me.
Yes, I think just to live a healthy human experience, we have to be willing to embrace change. I mean, the only constant is change, right? That old adage.
Yep.
And that's true not just for faith journeys, but for everything. Your kids grow up, they move out, relationships end, things are constantly changing and shifting. So, yeah, that is pivotal. Okay, number 3. We almost aligned perfectly on this one. Be patient with yourself. You don't have to have it all figured out. And then I added just be kind and patient. It takes time to undo a lifetime or decades or years or whatever your experiences were, however long that was in evangelicalism. It takes time to undo that indoctrination. I am still working through undoing those neural pathways in my brain from the systematic theology that I was operating under. And we have to be kind. We have to be full of love and compassion for ourselves. Because honestly, if we're not being public about it, or even if we are, we're not going to get the compassion that we need from other people, even if they are supportive of us through the journey. We have to start being compassionate with ourselves and being kind and not beat ourselves up. Which for me, that attitude stemmed from the teachings that I heard in my evangelical experience. The original sin, you can't trust your heart, you're wicked, you know. So to undo that, it's taking a while.
Yeah, for me, I learned to say I don't know a lot.
Hmm.
That just accepting that, because for a long time I had an answer, just like the scripture said, right? Be prepared to give an account for what you believe, and I was. If any situation arose, I had a scripture or a way of thinking that immediately guided my next thought and words. And so, with being patient with myself, I remember the first day that I said, I don't know, when it came to
Mm.
my faith. And it's funny, just those 3 words were so powerful to me. And I got into the practice of just saying, I don't know. Because I don't.
Right. I mean, none of us really do, right? None of us can be 100% certain of these mystical concepts that we're talking about and exploring.
Right.
Yeah, a humble attitude. It's good. Number 4, practice exposing yourself to other points of view. No one has it all figured out. And then I just added follow your intuition and curiosities in exposing yourself to these other points of view. And we talked a little bit about that in the previous tip we gave. But yeah, just don't be afraid to look into something that you've been curious about, but that you've been told not to engage with by some fear tactic or control mechanism within the church. People people overstate fear often in small groups from the pulpit to narrow and limit your experiences, because then it's easier to deal with as a pastor. If you kind of know and understand what people's experiences generally are, you don't have to be as well versed or knowledgeable in so many areas. And so while that makes sense, like that makes sense as a business model, to be honest, it doesn't serve you in listening to your gut and following your intuition. So, yeah, what would you add to that, Anna?
Yeah, there's now that we're living in social media age, my kids are, on social media, and one of the things I encourage them to do, and they practice, is following other accounts of beliefs and ideas that they aren't familiar with and don't necessarily agree with. And because, you have a tendency to kind of just stick in a lane,
Right.
with the information that comes in your life. You pick the news channel and the magazine and the social media content and the television that you watch. Everything is, you curate it based on what you're interested in and what you believe. But rarely do we really encourage ourselves into that uncomfortable realm of learning about other points of view. And I think that's, documentaries are great for that, obviously. But, just what is something that you're interested in that you'd like to learn more about, that maybe before you felt inhibited? And it's not so much to, it's more to expand as a person and to broaden your perspective about the world than anything else.
Yes. Yeah. Don't rob yourself of opportunities to learn and explore. Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, in the process, this leads us to our next one: practice radical acceptance. You don't have to have it all figured out, which, of course, flies in the face of what we are taught within evangelical circles is, like you said, have all the answers and be prepared. But it's okay to not. But letting go of that concept is hard. But that's a good way to love yourself.
Yeah, the idea of radical acceptance is somewhat new to me in the last year or so, and I've been like really exploring what that just those two words mean to me.
Mm,
Like, and I think for initially it comes across as radical agreeance. If that's a
right.
word, a radical agreement. But it's not. It's acceptance is giving people the space to be human and make their own choices. And that whole idea is bizarre to evangelical
Hmm.
Christianity,
Yes.
So it's practicing that has been helpful in removing myself from the pressure and the stress, really, of feeling like other people's choices or decisions are up to me.
Right. Right. It makes me think of that, the whole love the sinner, not the sin. Is that right? Yeah. Love the sinner, not the sin.
Right, right,
Oh
right,
gosh. I mean, that's so harmful for so many reasons, but that's the opposite of radical acceptance.
right.
So to have to undo that, we're undoing so much stuff. Oh my gosh. Um, but okay, one thing that we fully had in common in our list, another thing actually, was find other people who are willing to come alongside you. Don't underestimate the power of verbal processing. And yeah, I added onto that, like, find someone who's on a similar journey that you can share with and feel less alone, because it's such an isolating experience. And it often feels like nobody can understand this. This is my faith. I'm the one deconstructing it. Of course, nobody's going to have the same exact experience, but there are people undergoing the same process. It just looks a little bit differently for everyone. And Anna and I are both verbal processors, clearly, because we're doing the podcast together. um, so, yeah, I know, Anna, you have a specific experience with somebody. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how that really encouraged you and your husband in this process?
Yeah, sure. Oh man, we have a beautiful old friend that we've known for 30 years and that we used to go to church together. And he had gone through deconstruction before us, and we knew that, and we were still excellent friends throughout his deconstruction. And then it came time for Ricky and I to go through our deconstruction, and he just so graciously, patiently, and lovingly came alongside us and really just listened most of the time. Yeah, we're going to talk more about how to love others through their deconstruction, and I'm going to get into that, I think, more. But yeah, finding other people was finding our friend, having him come alongside us was priceless. It genuinely, it's hard to even put into words because it was more. I felt more at peace
Mm.
knowing I wasn't alone. Even though my husband and I were going through things at the same time, it was also very challenging to feel at peace with everything that we were going through because we were kind of at different places at different times. And talking to a third person helped us feel like that was okay as well. And just enjoying laughing together about what we were going through was really, really helpful. So yeah, having someone else is probably one of the most important steps on this entire list. And you can do that so many different ways. You know, you can find forums online. I mean, our friend is long distance, so we did a lot of video calls with him, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a week. It seemed like we were talking to him, even if it was just for brief periods or just a text or something. Any type of connection, human connection, to make you feel like you're less alone is going to be a valuable asset.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, as I was in the midst of my feeling totally alone, you reached out to me and said, "Hey, it seems like we're on a similar path. Like, let's reconnect and start chatting about this." And you, Anna, have been really instrumental in my deconstruction, in understanding that I'm not alone and we're sharing this road. So,
Yeah,
yeah, thanks for that. It is. It's really important to have some camaraderie. Yeah. Okay. So
that's
we have
awesome.
two more, and these were specifically mine. This not we did not overlap on these, but I know Anna agrees.
Yes.
They're all valuable. So number 7 is take a break from the questioning and learning when you need it. For me, it felt really overwhelming. I was consuming podcasts at an astounding rate, being challenged in my theology mostly, and kind of reconsidering everything, every doctrine I was ever taught, and taught as quote unquote biblical. It was a really tough, grueling, kind of academic experience for me, and that's exhausting. So there came a time where I didn't take a conscious choice or like make the decision I'm going to stop learning now. It was just I felt like I didn't want to listen to another theological podcast. So I started listening to other lighthearted ones that were just for entertainment. And at one point I was like, "Oh gosh, did I stop the work? Like I'm not done for sure." But I just didn't feel like I had the capacity for it at that point in time. And so I just gave myself permission to take a break and take some time to just fill up with laughter and lightness, because it's heavy, it's dark, it's soul searching, this kind of work. And to acknowledge that, I think it's really important to show yourself that love and give yourself opportunity to just kind of check out when you need to. So that was a really important part for me. And when you're ready, jump back into the podcast, jump back into the reading whenever, it's like, it's that whole listening to your intuition. Just let it lead you.
Yeah, agreed. I'll take this opportunity to kind of chime in. Just earlier when we were talking about radical acceptance and being patient with yourself and change, like I spaced it. We had talked earlier, but anyway, I wanted to add, and taking a break from questioning or learning, but all this kind of ties in together. It's a lot of patience with yourself.
Yes.
And in starting this podcast, it was a leap of faith for me, and I'm so glad that Kari Jo has come alongside me, and I feel the same way, Kari Jo. I'm so grateful that we've been able to do our journey together. It's been really encouraging, but also I've chosen intentionally to not show my face on any of our media. There are specific people in my life that I love so dearly and I know are going to be devastated when they find out about this part of my life. And when I say devastated, I don't mean that lightly. And I am intentionally choosing this platform to practice bravery and courage and to be vulnerable with the world, because I think it's valuable. I think it's useful information. I think it'll be helpful to people, even if just a few. That's enough for me. But I would like to one day make the transition to show myself and to be able to be even that much more vulnerable. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think the wisdom is still there, and the encouragement is there, and we're still here. So I had to add that because I had forgotten to mention it earlier. But I also think that taking a break is really valuable, and from your questioning and learning, but also being patient with yourself, like we said earlier, and learning how to disconnect in whatever way you feel like you need to.
Yes. Yeah. And that's part of like boundary setting, right? And I feel like everybody's boundaries are going to be different depending on what
Yeah.
we need and the dynamics of our social situations. It might not be a great idea ever for somebody to be public about their deconstruction, and that's totally okay.
Right.
It's just
Right.
a matter of, making peace with yourself of where you're at, and also knowing that you don't owe anybody an answer if they start asking you questions like, oh, I've noticed fill in the blank. How are you doing in your walk with Jesus? Like you don't owe them an answer. You can draw a boundary and just state, I'm not really in a position where I feel like I'm ready to talk about that right now, and just leave it at that, and just hope that people will respect the boundaries that we set up.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's a very individual experience, and it's okay if you never go public with what you're experiencing and where you're at. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that reminder. That's really good.
Yeah.
And then lastly, last on our list, number 8, how to love yourself. I said seek therapy to recover from any religious trauma. And, depending on your experience, your mileage may vary depending on like what amount of trauma, if any, you experienced. My guess is though, if you were an evangelical, there is at least some amount of trauma to unpack. Many of the doctrines are harmful. Hell, so many. Like I'm not going to go into the list. We'll probably save that for another podcast. But to allow yourself to find some healing from that, to allow your brain to come to a place where it doesn't automatically jump to fear because you were taught this at one point in your life. I think that's really important. For me personally, I've experienced anxiety somewhat recently, and so I reached out to some religious trauma counselors, and I have actually 2 more consultations coming up next week to see if it's a good fit. And that has been, just reaching out has been really freeing and lightened my load. And I'm experiencing less anxiety, just kind of knowing that there is help and hope on the horizon. So yeah, and again, that may not be for everyone, depending on what your experience has been. But for me, this is a really important thing that I need outside help to help me work through some of that and some of the anger that I feel.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing that. I'm going to counseling too, but for different reasons. And I think just in general, normalizing that is just a healthy thing no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. So that
Awesome.
concludes our loving yourself list. Be on the lookout for part 2 of this episode, where Anna and I talk about how to love others going through deconstruction. Well, friends, that wraps up this heretical episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to rate and review our podcast and share with anyone who would be encouraged. See you next time.